Welcome back. We get to look at the book of Joshua now for a few minutes. So, as we approach Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Samuel, Kings, we've not really closed the book on Torah. Actually, these books, known as the former prophets in Jewish circles, are often referred to as deuteronomistic history. That is, they're continuing the narrative of Deuteronomy. And there are three programmatic passages that move the narrative along: Deuteronomy 31, Joshua 23, and 2 Samuel 7. These three programmatic passages are then fleshed out by 2 episodes each that demonstrate either the success or the failure in the narrative history of the people of God. So think about it. First main one, Deuteronomy 31. Moses gives the marching orders for conquest and settlement of the promised land. That's fleshed out in Joshua 2, where the conquest commences, and then wrapped up in Joshua 11, 12, 13, where the conquest is wrapped up and preparations are being made for distributing the land, the territory, and settling in the land. Joshua 23. Joshua reaffirms this covenant program for life in the land of rest. That's fleshed out in Judges chapter 2. What happens there? God's people violate the covenant. In 1 Samuel 12, God's people actually reject Yahweh in preference for a human warlord, a Nagid. Which brings us to the third programmatic passage, and that's 2 Samuel 7, God's promise to David by way of Nathan. The two passages that flesh that out are 1 Kings 8, where that promise is fulfilled, at least in the first instance, in the person of Solomon, and then 1 Kings 17, that records the failure of the monarchy. So, now to Joshua. What would you say are 2 or 3 of the most significant things that have happened in the narrative to this point? As you read the story, the conquest of the first city in Canaan applied a rather unorthodox strategy, wouldn't you say? How do you think this new young leader, Joshua, must have felt when he received his marching orders? What do you think must have been going on through the minds of his troops? What evidence do you see that Joshua was indeed a transformational leader, or maybe not? I'd like to suggest a couple of passages as key verses. The first is in Joshua chapter 1. Joshua chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. Joshua 1, 5 through 9. No man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I've been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you, nor forsake you. So be strong, courageous, for you will give this people possession of the land, which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Don't turn from it to the right or to the left, so that you may have success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way successful. You will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. Haven't I commanded you, be strong and courageous. Don't tremble, don't be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And then over to chapter 21, Joshua chapter 21, verses 44 and 45. And the Lord gave them rest on every side, according to all that he had sworn to their fathers. No one of all their enemies stood before them. The Lord gave all their enemies into their hand. Not one of the good promises which the Lord had made to the house of Israel failed. All came to pass. So, who's the author of Joshua? Well, actually, the book of Joshua is anonymous. Tradition assigns authorship to Joshua himself. So, for example, in the Talmud, there's the claim that Joshua wrote all but the last 8 verses. As you read through the text, you'll note the use of the first person. It was Joshua who crossed the Jordan River in chapter 5. You've got the claim of chapter 24, 26, at least with reference to the previous couple of chapters. So Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God and took a large stone and set it up there under the oak that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. So the argument is made that Joshua is at least responsible for the bulk of what's going on in the book of Joshua. There is evidence of Joshua's use of written sources. So, for example, in chapter 10, verse 13, you can compare that with 2 Samuel 1:18, and you'll see the parallel there, the connection. On the other hand, there is some evidence of a later writer, or at least editor. For example, stylistic clues regarding the passage of time. There are just a number of examples peppered throughout the book of Joshua where the comment is made, something has happened, and it is to this day, indicating that we're now, as we're writing this, it's later than the time of the actual event. Evidence of editorial work, again, chapter 24, verses 29 and 30, Joshua's obituary. It's true, Joshua was one who led Israel in the defeat of the Amalekites back in Exodus 17. He was one of the 12 spies in Numbers 13. He was the one who was ordained to succeed Moses, Numbers, and again, Deuteronomy. So we've got a historical character who internally, it's claimed, is writing this testimony. So that's something we need to deal with. The genre, let's think of that for a moment. And you've probably guessed that it's historical narrative, theological historical narrative, but it also includes what might be termed military annals. It is recording, it's analyzing, A-N-N-A-L-izing, the military exploits of Israel. Well, what's the theme of the book? I think there are some clues in the repetition of terms like possession, inheritance, rest, that whatever's going on here, it's giving a theological interpretation of history in terms of Israel's possessing and inheriting the land. I mean, that was a big deal in Deuteronomy. It's a big deal in terms of the linkage back to Abraham. This land, the land of Canaan, and the people of Israel are referred to as Yahweh's inheritance. You see that in 1 Samuel 26, 2 Samuel 21, 1 Kings 8, or his possession, his treasured possession. in Joshua 22, 2 Chronicles 20, his treasured people, Exodus 19, Deuteronomy 7, the people of inheritance, and again, just peppered throughout this Deuteronomic history. So, Israel becomes the promised people, and Canaan the promised land. 25 times in Deuteronomy, the land is called a gift from God. So, what's the significance of the book? Well, on the one hand, it demonstrates that God is a God of justice. I mean, it's true, judgment was postponed for 400 years, but that wasn't by accident, and now the day of reckoning has come. Judgment falls. It also completes the story of redemption. They were not just rescued from bondage in Egypt, but they were rescued to enter into God's rest. It shows evidence of God's faithfulness. It demonstrates that even though humanity rebels against God, His promise, this promise project, cannot be ultimately defeated. So, the promise that was recorded back in Genesis 12 through 15, now Joshua narrates God's hand at work in fulfilling this part of the promise. Think about that. We get back together, we'll talk about structure of Joshua.